I come at things from a scientific mindset. I like to build, measure, learn. I like to come up with a hypothesis and then test it. And we want to say that running experiments is not always just about trying new things, although many, many times it is. It's about running disciplined, data-driven tests that allow your organization to learn rapidly, and rapidly being the key thing here. You want to be able to learn faster than anybody else. You just heard from Sean. He's, in a way, all of those designs are micro experiments. But the key is, and then he's using a series of tests and techniques to test all those experiments. Sean, thank you for sharing that. It was a really, really lovely example and kind of lead in to this portion. The thing is that when you get good at this, it becomes so deeply embedded in your culture that it becomes a function of other attributes like autonomy, and your culture begins to be able to accept that learning from failure is not bad. It's actually good. And the companies that do the best job of implementing experimentation actually somewhat institutionalize the success of failure. I know that sounds crazy, but the faster you learn and fail forward, the cheaper that failure can be. And so, a really, really good experiment has a really clear hypothesis. For example, if we offer next day delivery, conversion rates will increase by 10%. This would be a sales and marketing and operational type of hypothesis. And then you'd set a KPI for that, a defined metric. You'd say, what does it look like? And that might be a percent increase in usage of the service, right? The next day service. And then you might see an uptick in your overall NPS scores if you're collecting that data with every sale, which you should. And then you also absolutely must have a time box. You must have a test duration that is hopefully relatively short. I use an analogy from college, major and minor. Run your experiments so that some of them are really quick hits and fast, but run some larger, longer term experiments as they go, but they're still not vague. They still are not fully open-ended. Otherwise, they wouldn't really be an experiment. And you need to make sure that you track that, right? So the key is that no matter what results come back, whether you like those results or whether you don't like those results, you have to be willing to trust the data, even if it disproves your idea. And if you then don't take the results of those experiments and act on them, operationalize the outcome, well, then you're done. You just wasted your time, your money, your effort, your team's time, effort, and money, and probably multiple human years of effort, even on a small team. One of the companies that we see that we really, really like, and that literally must run tens of thousands of experiments a year and has a deeply institutionalized way of doing so, is Amazon. It's built deeply into their DNA, and a quote from Amazon is that our success is a function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, and per day. Okay? And this, over many years, has deeply, deeply embedded itself in their culture. There's a great book called Working Backwards, if you haven't read it, that digs into this to a deep degree. And at Amazon, teams are encouraged to test and experiment and fail forward fast, and they're given time and budgets. This isn't something they have to do in their weekend off hours. It's literally just built into the job. And that's something you got to think about is, are you really encouraging your team members to experiment, or are you just sort of doing experimentation theater? You don't want to do the latter. And then the mechanism is that, you're looking at Amazon, they have something called the institutional yes. What the institutional yes is that you're not allowed to say no until if you say no, you basically have to write a thesis on why. And so this encourages people to say yes more often. They run very small teams. They call them 2-pizza teams. They're typically between 3 and 7 people max. They try to go very fast, and they try to keep their experiments contained. The actual Amazon webpage is one of the coolest examples of experimentation. Every little spot on that webpage is on a grid, and every section of that grid is served oftentimes by a different service or microservice behind the scenes. And they can A/B test that at will, A, B, C, D, E, F, Z test that at will, all day, every day, 24 hours a day, collect that and data back and make a choice of whether they should have the word the or than in a sentence. I mean, they can get to that level of granularity. So that's a really, really great example. These are some additional examples here that we love. Canva is one that is absolutely on fire lately. If you just watch their last public presentation where the CEO and the whole team is up there on a really fancy stage, every single thing that they're launching live. We're not talking about thinking about it. Hey, we're going to try to do X, Y, and Z. No, they're launching dozens of services a quarter, and they're seeing what sticks. And I am a Canva user, so I see what's happening in the background where things are showing up and disappearing. Now, this can be a little chaotic from the user perspective, and Canva does feel a little bit like they've sort of shotgun blasted things right now. But I understand why they're doing it, because they see the rapid pace of technology and are not willing to be left behind because they didn't even try, right? And so that's kind of what's up. And this is just a whole other number of companies that are really wonderful at doing experimentation on a day-to-day basis. Again, I would direct you to Alex, the chatbot, and say, hey, Alex, Kent told me that Gymshark is a really great example of experimentation. How do they do it? Spotify, how do they do it? And you'll find that you have some really interesting deep dialogues. And just as a little note, Alex is primarily built out of the books that have been written by Salim and Peter and Michael and the community. And so when you're talking to that bot, you're actually talking to us in a lot of ways. So just like in the others, we have some key questions that you need to be asking if you're going to be implementing experimentation. And this is a list of those key questions. And by the way, a lot of these questions come from the EXO Canvas, which you saw earlier. So this is a tool that you'll have to move forward. So, what do you want to learn when you run your experiment? How will you measure the success? Do not start experiments without already having figured out how you're going to measure success. How can we encourage experimentation within the organization? Can you think of an assumption that the team has right now? They're operating on an assumption, not a data-driven fact. And what's one small test that you could run this month to validate? And then use this simple experiment template to give yourself a shot at building experiments. And think short-term small experiments to start. Then ask yourself that if we do X, will we see Y outcome, the prediction, in a certain amount of time? How will you measure it? And then how fast can you test it? That is what you're up to and what you want to do in this model. So there you go. That is all the questions. And that is an introduction or a demonstration of experimentation where we are. Two things. Number one, this is going to sound a little silly, okay? I know, but it is what it is. I personally have way too much to do. I'm like everybody else. And it's called time blocking. You just have to look at your calendar 1 week out, grab 2 hours, chunk it on there, 90 minutes even, whatever you can do, call it experiment time, and be religious about it. You cannot let anything else get in the way of that. I know that sounds crazy, but it's enough to start that way. And then in the first week, devise your experiment. We've got this whole guide and thing that we've given you here. Just run through that process. And if it takes you 4 weeks, it takes you 4 weeks. But that's okay. At least you're doing it, and you'll find that it's way more accessible than you think. The second thing is staff on demand. Perhaps there is a person, a coach, a consultant, something like that you can bring into your team that can help you drive this, can help you have that discipline, keep you accountable, and move you forward. And again, it does not need to be at a blistering pace. I helped a financial services company in Idaho once. They wanted to become an EXO. They decided that they could only afford to implement one attribute a month and spend X number of hours. I think it was 2 or 3 hours. So the whole team came together once a month. They set the experiment at the beginning of the month. They had the KPI they were going to hit in the plan by the end of the month. They got together again at the end of the month and checked how they did, right? And they would build very small teams throughout the month to spend a small amount of their time doing it. And they implement one attribute a month. You do that 12 times in a year, boom, you're there. And it does not cost you that much. So I generally will try to nicely say you have the time.
I want to just reiterate this. There's a company out of Australia called Smart Group, and they basically have 10 projects running every quarter on the 10 attributes, and every quarter they just re-up. So they pick somebody to be the point person, and every month they're upping dashboards or community. They grew like 7x over 2 years by applying this.
Yeah.
One the key thing is a lot of people focus on one or the other. It turns out the holistic approach of adding bits of all the attributes is a huge multiplier.
Yes, perfectly said. And you do one, then do two at a time, then do 10 at a time, like he just said. Give yourself a little bit of a chance to ramp up. It is hard to jump in the deep end, but you can do it if it depends. And then, come and see us. We're here literally every week to help people who are trying to do these kinds of things. Yeah, thank you. I see that in the chat. I'm glad that was helpful.
If you enjoyed this, click the thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. The algorithm thinks you'll enjoy this video next.